Today for the video, I'm going to be answering questions while doing a solar install. So yeah, should be fun. Okay, here we have our install tools, materials. We're going to put up 2 solar panels so we can charge our Yetis. These are the pieces of hardware that we're going to use to mount 2 solar panels. So this is the little panel that was up here before. So tiny. And we're replacing it with that. Okay. Alright, there's one. Alright, cool. Woo! Okay, now we're going to show how we connect the solar panels to the solar generator, the power pack. Okay, let's go. I'll follow you in. And then the cord, it enters through the side like that. Simple and effective. Okay, question number 1 is, who is my Indigenous hero and why? Someone who I really look up to is Winona LaDuke. She is my touchstone. She is the person who I've always looked up to, and the reason why is because she has so much strength and integrity, and she's very well spoken. She has such presence, and I've always looked up to that. Question number 2 is, if I could interview anybody past or present, who would it be? I would interview Crazy Horse. Okay, the next question is, what is the most important lesson that we should be teaching the children? And my answer to that is that we should all be teaching our children the concept of meaning the concept of respecting those around you, knowing the proper relationships between oneself and those around them, whether it's in their family or their community, their clan system. Isn't just a Diné concept for Diné people. It's a concept for human beings as a whole. And so understanding what your relationship is to those around you, understanding your relationship and responsibilities is key. Because tied to that understanding is also the understanding of discipline, the understanding of respect, the understanding of one's self, one's own strength and foundation. And I think that is so key to children who are growing up to be adults, and then to one day hopefully become elders, to one day hopefully become leaders in their own communities. Okay, question number 4 is, what is going on with Diné Bazad fluency, and how can we do a better job learning the language? So this is a really touchy subject because this is probably the first time in history where the majority of Diné people don't speak the language. And there are a lot of contributing factors linked to it. The thing I believe, and I continue to point out, is that the loss of language isn't so much the fault of the people. The loss of language was a systematic, forced means of control over a people. The switch from Diné Bazad fluency to fluency in a colonizer's language, meaning English or Spanish, it happened over time, over a period of 100, 200 years, and it's linked to the government pushing our people into Western education, institutions. And it's also linked to, power systems. So it's a big thing that you can't put on the shoulders of individuals, and yet we do that all the time. So I could blame my parents all day for not teaching me. We could blame other people, but really it's our responsibilities to take the initiative to learn. And one of the big problems, right, like with that, is that sometimes you don't have people who are willing to teach you, or people who tell you that it's not important. And that's been my experience. So I have been trying to learn for many years. I've taken classes at various institutions, at U of A, at Denton College, and I am picking it up. I pray about it all the time. I do my best to listen and learn, and I feel like my tongue is finally like unwinding. That's what it feels like. So it's been a process. I feel like this topic though is coming up because right now, I mean, like this, like very recently, our annual Miss Navajo Nation competition recently took place in Winter Rock, Arizona, and there were 2 competitors who were like working toward the title, and neither of them spoke Navajo. And it was this huge debate. There was a lot of shaming. There was a lot of fingers being pointed. There was a lot of arguments happening around it. And so that's really been a big topic of discussion. I think that's why this question was asked. So personally, like I could go on for days about how I don't think we should be shaming each other. I could go on for days about why it's important to encourage rather than discourage. And I don't know if it would change anything. But just because I feel that way doesn't mean that I don't think the language is important, or that I don't think the language needs to be learned, relearned, and retaught. So I'm doing my best to learn, to teach. I believe it's so important to know how to pray, to know how to sing, and to know how to tell a story. And so for that reason, I know I'm going to be a student for life. I know that this is going to be a journey that's going to carry me into old age. And I'm down for the mission. I'm down to do that. I'm willing to do the work. And I just encourage other people to, take on that attitude that just because you can't do something now doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to do it in the future. Just like anything, we go to school, we learn skills, we study, we practice for the purpose that one day we'll be able to do this thing that we can't do right now, So I don't know. I mean, keep your head up, people. Practice, sing, listen. There's steps that we can take every day. There's apps out there that we can download, and I just encourage you to do that. I'm not going to be one to shame anybody. I don't feel like that's my position or place, but yeah, keep learning, everyone. That's all I can say about that. Okay, Mike's back. So this next question was actually addressed to myself and my husband, and it was a statement about how there are a lot of stories and accounts of the Navajo Nation PD having a lagging response to domestic situations. And the question is, what do I think, or we think, the Navajo Nation government can do to improve response times? So I was thinking I could hand it off to Mike first, and then I can weigh in.
Okay. I think I'm not a big fan of police. And I say that in order to display the bias that I typically have for law enforcement agencies, but that is more of an application of off-reservation policing. So with that aside, we know that the Navajo Nation is the largest Native nation in the United States, perhaps in the world. and we know that the policing staff they're patrolling a large amount of land. And so when I hear 911 is a joke in the ghetto, that's intentional. When I hear 911 is a joke on the res, I think the cops around here, they really care about trying to save lives. They just have hundreds of miles to cover, and so it's an understaffing that goes on all the way to the root. 3 overlapping jurisdictions, along with the Navajo Nation jurisdiction, along with federal jurisdiction. There's a lot of red tape that goes on, and cross-deputizing deputies has worked to some extent. But it really does go back to the U.S. Supreme Court, the so-called Supreme Court, that I like to call the court of the colonizer, that does everything they can to undermine the capabilities of Native nations to police and protect their people. So with all of that in place, it's a big mess. And so there isn't one thing that the Navajo Nation itself can do. It's going to have to be a collaboration of people that care and citizens that rise up and say, no more, this is enough.
In addition to everything Michael stated, my relationship with the police is somewhat unique because my father used to be he was a police officer with the Navajo Nation Police Department, and I grew up with a very strong respect for our police officers because I saw the commitment, the commitment level that he had, and the pride he took in his work, and the heart he put into it. That is very unique to the Navajo Nation, because that's how I see a lot of our police officers. They're not out there intentionally brutalizing the people. They're not out there trying to enforce their own power on people to throw them in jail or to tear them apart, to kind of throw them into the machine of the criminal justice system. I don't see that happening. And so because of that, I don't have any hate toward the police. And I feel like I've always done my best to walk within the lines and boundaries that exist because of the laws of the land here on the Navajo Nation. So with that perspective, what I think the Navajo Nation can do is maybe start with messaging about the importance of I don't know, it's hard because you don't want to force the Navajo Nation, the government, to fix social problems. Those are problems that we should be addressing on our own, within our own families and individually. Why should we have the Navajo Nation tell us how to behave and how to treat each other and how to treat family and how to treat our partners and spouses and children? We shouldn't even be tasking them with that. So for me to say, well, I think the Navajo Nation should do this or that, or place these laws, I kind of think that's dumb. I think we are smart enough to know the solutions to our own social problems. And it's really about policing ourselves and policing each other, holding each other accountable. And like I said before, teaching the concept of that's so important. So I don't know, what do you think about that?
The idea that we return to the teachings of the Nebabehas Ani is pretty wise. And
Sorry.
The idea that we remember as a mechanism of accountability is key and important. And one of the teachings that Adrian and I were taught as we've gone along in life was that you have this, if you've ever seen the sand painting of Mother Earth and Father Sky, that's the model for how you treat your spouse. That there's a equity in the talents of women, there's an equity in the talents of men. It doesn't mean that one is better than the other, but they all bring something necessary to the relationship. And without Mother Earth and Father Sky in cooperation, we couldn't have life on Earth. And Adrian and I, we manage our Hogan in that way. I have certain talents that I bring, and she has certain talents that she brings, and it doesn't make one of us better than the other. But we know without the other, there cannot be life, period. And so there are certain ways that we adhere to in our treatment of one another.
Yeah, and how we treat like our friends and our
Yes.
family and our children. It's all within that model of understanding that every individual life has value and every relationship should be taken seriously, and we don't neglect those people in our lives. We don't neglect those responsibilities.
And that's the idea that, you know, from house to house, as people figure out how to live by that rule, it's not a man-made law. There isn't a Navajo Nation government that can enforce it. The Nebabehazani is law of the yin, and that's how we run ourselves. That's how I run myself. I know that's how I keep myself accountable. That's the law that I follow. It doesn't have to come from another man. It's made by the holy people.
I know it's hard to only run most of the world. Just remember, no white men were harmed in the theft of this land. So many times you had to take, made it look so easy. Just remember, no white men were harmed in the theft of this land.
Right, everyone, that's the end of the video. Thank you for submitting your questions, and thanks for writing with us. It was fun. We'll see you in the next episode of Navajo Tea Time. Hagoshi, power up, eh?